Hello everyone, so today is Tuesday 21st of October 2025, the anniversary of the Battle of Trafalgar. So I thought I would play an Age of Sail game to commemorate the anniversary, but also to celebrate the journey of Langton miniatures, which comes to a conclusion at the end of the month after 36 years in business. Rod and Carol Langton are retiring, and at present it doesn't look as though the range is going to be taken over by anyone else, so that is the end of the availability of Langton miniatures models. So a sad occasion in one respect, but also, as I say, we can celebrate, this fantastic range, and thought I would get them out on the table on the anniversary of Trafalgar, and play a game, Age of Sail game, using the Warhammer Historical game rules called Trafalgar. It's a very basic, simple kind of application of the rules today. I'm not going to confuse myself even further, other than having all the models that I own on the table, which is going to be a headache enough to monitor. But I'm not adding upgrades to any of the ships, and I'm not. For instance, I've got sort of specific models on the table. So over. Where are we? There, for instance, at the head of that line is HMS Victory and HMS Bellerophon. There are special rules in Trafalgar that allow you to give named ships certain abilities that's once you're over a certain points level, which I think I probably am. But I'm not going to do that. It's the Victory and the Bellerophon behind it and so on are simply going to be first-rate ships of the line, and that's it. And the other thing that I'm changing as well is I've got somewhere over here. There we are. That is my compass and weather vane. So north is that way, and the wind direction at the moment is in that direction. Now, in Trafalgar, I've always found that the rules for wind change and so on are there, so they've taken wind into account, which is obviously very important in an Age of Sail game. But I never really liked the way it could change in the weather phase at the beginning of each turn. It can change quite abruptly. I much preferred the system that Rod Langton introduced in his own rules called Signal for Close Action, where you roll. The wind has a strength and it also has a potential, so it can vary for anything from light airs, well, it can be calm, light airs up to a gale. So it goes through calm, light airs, light breeze, moderate breeze, strong wind, and then gale. So you've got all those gradations of strength, and you've also got a thing called the wind's potential. So again, you roll dice at the beginning of each turn, and the wind can be decreasing and backing, decreasing and veering, steady, increasing and backing, or increasing and veering. And if you duplicate that twice in a row at the beginning of any turn, then the wind will change, will alter its strength and direction. And that is a really lovely mechanic. I really enjoy that, because it means as a player you have to be aware, that, so for instance, the wind is blowing, does have the possibility of blowing the English fleet in that direction onto that headland. But I've just rolled to see what it is at the moment, and for the beginning of the game, and it's actually a moderate breeze and steady, so it'll be at least 2 or 3 turns before that possibility might arise. But it's there. That's what I like about it, that you have to be aware of the weather conditions, not just the fact that at the beginning of the next turn the dice are going to roll and it might suddenly and abruptly and unrealistically change. You've got one kind of eye on the weather all the time, and trying to note how it's changed and how you can use that potential change to your advantage. So I really like that, so I'm going to play that. The other thing I've done is that with my collection I've got more in the way of points value for the French and Spanish vessels. So I have given the British, I've put them upwind, as it were, so they have the advantage of the weather gauge because the wind is going in that direction and they are all off that way. So that gives them a kind of an advantage. So hopefully it will balance out the disadvantage they have from being outnumbered, as it were. Okay, so what I'm going to do is play along without the camera running, rather than show you every granular detail of the moves and so on. But I might show you some of the dice rolls for the gunfire and so on. We'll see how it goes as we go along. So I'm about to start this game, and I'll update you at the end of the first turn. Okay, so at the end of turn 1, all the ships have moved and manoeuvred, but the gunnery ranges just fall short of being in range of one another. The rules are a little bit odd in that you move each ship individually, and you have to move them with the one that is the most leeward of the wind moving first, which gives the opponent that has the weather gauge the advantage. So if you're trying to maneuver in formations, it means that, say you're in a line, it is possible, because you have to move these ships in this instance, you have to move these ships before you move those ships, that you can potentially collide, you can potentially sail into the stern of the ship that you're following, which is a bit gamey in a way, because obviously that ship would be moving as well, but in the game it's not, it's stationary until it has its turn to move. So it has caused a little bit of which I like in one respect. It's caused a little bit of confusion because it is quite difficult to maintain formation and so on. So some of the ships have had to turn, that one slightly, this one here more dramatically so, just to avoid hitting the ship in front, which kind of, and they've got slightly different speeds as well. So it kind of does show that you have to hone your skills at manoeuvring in this game, which I suppose is realistic in another. And these 3 ships here are, these 2 are frigates, so they can turn a little bit more nimbly, but because they are going to have to eventually tack into the wind to avoid this headland, and that involves command checks and so on, that they are in a sort of slightly precarious situation, because if they fail their command checks, then they're taken aback and risk damage to the masts and so on. But this ship here is the only one that's attempted attack so far, and it successfully made the attack. So it's beating against the wind now, so it's safe. Although it is going to have to, avoid colliding with any of these ships. And up the other end, in terms of the British, they are going to be in quite a good situation in a moment, because this sort of line of French, that are closer to the shoreline, are going to be blocked from firing by the ships that are further out to sea, whereas the British ships are going to have sort of an open shot at that sort of right hand side of the formation there, and this frigate here has successfully turned and is about to sort of cross the bows of those two ships there, but currently it's out of range, and also it doesn't have particularly heavy armament. I think it's got 2 heavy guns and 2 light guns, but it might inflict some damage on those ships, one or the other, because it will be raking them. And I've also, we're now to turn 2, and I've rolled for the weather, and the wind remains steady, so we're still in sort of ideal sailing conditions, and moderate breeze and a steady wind. Okay, so some shots exchanged at long range in that turn. More damage inflicted on the British, I would say. Victory took a little bit of hull damage, and the frigate in the background there that you can't really make out took some damage. But I mean, that was mainly because those 2 Spanish ships there, the Spanish ships in these wars are very heavily armed with heavy guns, but that makes them much kind of heavier in general, so it's harder for them to turn. They have to make command checks in order to make 2 shallow turns, whereas normally ships of the line, the first and second and third rates, can make 2 shallow turns without having to check. But they do have a factor of 6 for the heavy guns, whereas normally it would be 4. But what actually damaged the French fleet the most was a lot of these ships are having to attempt to tack, to turn into the wind, in an attempt to get, to cross the T of the British ships, and they're all failing their command checks to tack. So the ones in the distance there taken aback trying to tack to avoid the headland, and the other ones were taken aback trying to tack in order to cross the line, cross the T of the British line. So most of them have suffered small amounts of damage to their foremasts. And next turn is about to happen, and I've rolled for the wind potential again, and it remains steady. Okay, now quite a lot of exchange of gunfire in that turn, and also over here you can see I've actually in the days when Trafalgar rules from Warhammer Historical were being published, Litco did a lot of supplementary tokens, so I've got those out. I'm finding those quite useful. So all the red sails are stationary vessels. So the French have had appalling seamanship trying to attack, and have all been taken aback and had to heave to and are stationary at the moment. So that's what those red sails indicate. So half the French fleet aren't able to get into action at the moment. Over here, the Victory managed to get a bow rake. This is the Victory here, back on the Santa Ana, and did a lot of damage. None of it really apparent. You just tick off boxes on, a damage table. You have a table for each ship. But the most significant thing, apart from a great deal of crew loss and hull damage to the Santa Ana, is that her rudder is damaged at the moment, so she can't currently change course or manoeuvre or do anything like that. In fact, I must remember because the Santa Ana will move first in the next turn, she would collide with the Victory, so I must remember to do a brace for impact test, which will mitigate the consequences of that. In fact, that is what happened over here. Thinking about it now, remembering these two ships here collided, which is why they are stationary, and they damaged below the waterline. They're both damaged quite significantly below the waterline, but not enough to sink at the moment. But this was certainly the most significant damage on the Santa Ana there. And I think earlier I said this ship was the Bellerophon. It's actually the Royal Sovereign. That took a critical hit, which has thrown the crew into confusion, basically. So in the next turn and the turn after, they won't be able to fire, which again, I've got one of these Litco markers here I'm using, which is a cannon with a cross through it. Now, the British do have the ability to shake that off in the end phase of each turn with a successful command roll, but they failed the command roll. So I've left the marker on, obviously because they won't be able to fire this turn, but they will be able to do the same thing and try and shake it off at the end of the next turn as well. And yeah, apart from that, some sort of fairly desultory exchange of fire with sort of minimal amounts of damage, but the game is definitely heating up. So I must remember to do that brace for impact check, and then we're on to the next turn, and I've rolled for the wind's potential, and I've rolled that it is now increasing and backing. So if I roll either, because you could roll increasing and veering, or you could roll decreasing and backing, but if I roll either increasing or backing again next turn, that means that one or two things could happen. The wind will gain in strength and it will change in direction. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Right, so again, lots of damage inflicted on several ships, but that's only really apparent if you look at the damage chart. It's not something that you can really indicate too well on, with tokens and so on, but the Santa Ana here is very badly damaged now. Soon to be hulled below the waterline irretrievably and will sink. The Victory didn't get away scot-free though. She at one point had a cannot fire for the next two turns, but the the British have a quality that allows them to reduce that effect. So she will be able to fire next turn, but she's going to have to roll again for the turn after that. So I've left that marker on. Whereas the Royal Sovereign did manage to remove its cannot fire marker, so it will be able to fire in the next turn. Over here, at one point, this Spanish ship here was ablaze, but rolled very well and managed to put the blaze out. The French flagship here was raked and took considerable damage, and most of the stationary ships down this end of the table are now underway again, with the exception of that frigate there that drifted. This one is stationary. Sorry, yeah, what I mean to say is this one is still taken aback. This one has managed to heave, what they call heave to. It's not really heaving to, but it's the expression they use in these rules. So it's no longer taken aback, but it is stationary, but it will be able to get underway next go. And rolling for the wind, I rolled steady again, so there's no risk any longer of it changing direction or increasing strength for the next turn or so. Okay, on to the next turn. Right, so at the end of that turn, although again, as I keep saying, it's not very apparent from the models, there are a lot of ships close to sinking now. Quite a few have been successfully raked. I would say the British are having the advantage, but they do still have some ships that are quite badly damaged. There was one ship that, similar thing to previously, that caught fire. That was an British ship over here. This one was stern raked by the Spanish ship, and had also collided with this French ship. So it's got both of them. Well, one of them, the French ship, was badly damaged in the collision, but the British ship was set ablaze. But in the end phase, they managed to put the fire out, luckily for them. And it's not particularly late in the day, it's only sort of late afternoon at the moment, but I am beginning to feel a little bit kind of weary with all the accounting and bookkeeping and so on, and getting my head around rules that I haven't played in quite a long time. So I might take a break and return to the game tomorrow, I think. I've rolled for the wind and it's back to being steady, so no likelihood of the wind changing soon. And yeah, really enjoying it, but I don't want to kind of hurry myself. I want to do it at my leisure, so as I say, I'll take a short break and return to the game tomorrow. Not that you'll notice any difference other than possibly a improvement in the lighting, which is a bit dull and grey outside today. Well, I had a break and something to eat, and I felt refreshed, so I thought I would play another turn today rather than wait until tomorrow, because I am enjoying this. And it's dark now, so apologies that the light is a bit artificial now. Might even be an improvement on the daylight, which was very grey. But anyway, a very destructive, eventful turn. And again, although you wouldn't know from looking at the ships, there are a great many that are close to being either crippled, have lost nearly all their guns other than the light guns, or There's one there that is still ablaze, taking damage from the fire, but there was another ship that once again did manage to put the blaze out. Some of the ships are close to losing all their crew, but as I say, you can't really tell that. You have to look at the tables. Over here, the Santa Ana hasn't been able to pass a command check to back sails, and hasn't been able to fix her rudder, so is very close to sailing off the table now. Whereas the Victory has now come to a halt. So once the Santa Ana is off the table and there's nothing stopping her now, she's obliged to move 3 centimetres in the next turn. So as soon as a part of the base is over the table edge, that's it. It counts as being destroyed. So that's the first ship completely lost to the Franco-Spanish fleet. But there are a lot more of those ships on both sides that are close, very close indeed to sinking. The only other thing that might change the game slightly, which again maybe is a quirk of the rules, I don't know, but in the middle of those 3 ships there is the French flagship, which has taken a lot of damage, only has a light gun firepower now, but has just nudged ahead of that British ship behind it, and is therefore the French now have the weather gauge. In fact, thinking about it, that Spanish ship in the front, because the wind is going obliquely across the table, that Spanish ship is the most windward. So in the next turn, the French will have the weather gauge, and that might give them an advantage, even though when you look at the whole table, you know, the British do still have a far more commanding position, although it's just become a big scrum, really. But anyway, I am definitely going to stop for the day now and play another game, another turn, or carry on playing the game tomorrow. But I have rolled for the weather and it remains steady, so there's not going to be any change in the weather for the next 2 turns at least. And I think that's everything. You know, I could tell you about the condition of an individual ship, but just looking at the model, you wouldn't really know. You get all the information really from the tables, and they're not particularly attractive to look at. So I'll leave you with that for today and carry on tomorrow. Well, here we are, end of the first turn of the next day. Daylight is restored, and once again, just so much damage and destruction going on. There's hardly a vessel left untouched, and in many cases, although, as I said previously, you can't really see the effects on the models. Some of them are down to having a single crew box or a single mast left. They're all virtually on the point of some kind of demise. I'm using there aren't tokens for ships that have lost their rudder, so I'm using these crippled markers for temporarily to note that, because I'm just finding it really difficult to remember. I mean, you can write it down. Obviously, you can write on the ship's sort of roster sheet, but it's easier to have a sort of visual reminder on the table. But there are I can see 3 ships that have currently rudderless, and the rudder needs to be repaired. There are three that may not fire at the moment, and two. There were three, but there's now two ships that are ablaze, and also the Santa Ana has left the table now, so that is the first ship, totally, effectively destroyed. But yeah, very bruising engagement. I'll talk at the end of the game a little bit about how convoluted it's become. I think really this number of ships is the sort of upper limit of what you can handle, especially in a solo game. The amount of record keeping you have to make in order to keep it, accurate, keep a precise record of the damage on each ship. But yeah, enjoying it, but finding it sort of tiring at the same time. So you have to take it slowly. There's no rush. And also, I rolled for the potential change in the weather, and I rolled decreasing and backing. So if we get one of those two again in the next turn, then the wind again has got the possibility of altering. Right, so I'm halfway through the next turn, and I thought I would interrupt the play to take a little bit of footage just to show you how the gunnery system works, because it is quite neat and tidy. I think it works well, and also just to show you that there are ships beginning to sink now, even in the manoeuvre phase before the gunnery happens, because there's been a couple of collisions. A French 64 collided with the British Prince here and was already damaged below the waterline. Can't remember whether it was from gunfire or a previous collision, but it suffered so much below the waterline damage that it sank. So for one turn, the next turn, there'll be some debris there which will act as an obstacle. The Prince has actually, because it collided, it's actually come to a halt. So it doesn't pose a threat to the Prince because the Prince can simply choose to anchor. It would have to choose to anchor rather than drift because the wind is taking it in that direction. And the similar thing happened over here, only it was a collision between two French ships. But again, it was a French 64 that took sufficient damage to collide, to sink, and this 120 gun ship, French ship here, came to a halt because of the collision as well. But anyway, I thought I would show you an example of the gunnery, just one salvo, just to show you how it works. So the French currently have the weather gauge, so they decide all their ships fire first of all. It's kind of half and half simultaneous fire, and not so any damage. It's a 74 gun. It's going to fire on the Prince, and if the Prince is sunk, which it could conceivably be because it has taken a lot of below the waterline hits at the moment, it will still have the opportunity later in the gunnery phase to return fire. But if the 74 gun knocks out cannon or anything like that, that will be in effect when the Prince comes to fire. So the weather gauge again, it gives you an advantage in that respect as well. So, in some rules, in order to get a rake, you have to be firing down the length of the ship. But in these rules, they're a lot more, what's the word? Generous, I suppose, in that it's if you're firing within a 90, if you look at the centre mast, if you're firing within a 90-degree sector, then you are entitled to a rake, whether it's from the bow or the stern. So in this case, the angle of fire is 30 degrees, so the Prince is well within the arc of fire of the 74 gun, and it's also, the 74 gun is firing from within that 90-degree sector. So although in a lot of rules that wouldn't be a bow rake, that situation, in these rules they are. Now, in order to denominate, I don't know, I'm lost for words. In order to value the weight of fire that the 74 gun has, it's entitled to roll 4 light gun dice, 2 heavy gun, and 1 carronade. So we've got different coloured dice for all the different weights of gun, calibre of gun. The carronade, however, only has a range of 10 centimetres, and the range, I've measured the range between the mast, the centre mast, the main mast, and it's 16 centimetres. So the 74 gun won't be firing the carronade in this turn, but it can fire those other 2. But both of them are just beyond 15 centimetres. No, sorry, beyond 10 centimetres. So it's not close range. So to hit, you need to roll, in this case, a 4. Okay, so we've got quite a few misses there. Only the light guns have actually hit. I should have said as well that you have to nominate whether you're firing high or low, but the French have an advantage. The French practice was to mainly fire high at the rigging, and the French have an advantage that they don't suffer a penalty. You would suffer a penalty of -1 if you were firing high normally. French don't suffer that, and the French are performing a bow rake, firing at the rigging, a high target. So there's possibility any hits basically will be taken off with the foremast in this circumstance. And now the British get a chance to save, but because if it had been a low target, they would have had an advantage in saving, but they are basically just saving on 5s, so 5+, and they save both of those, and they save neither. I should have rolled them separately because one of them was a 6, and that is a critical hit, but as it happens they save neither, so it doesn't matter. So the 5 is just one box off of the foremast. You probably can see here that currently the Prince's masts are mainly intact apart from one hit on the mizzen mast, so we're just going to put a cross through there to begin with. Now the critical hit, you roll on a table in the book, So the high location's critical hit table. With light guns, however, you're only rolling a D3. So I'm going to halve the result of this die roll, which is 2. So it's only going to be D6 result 1. And the result of that is the men panic and take cover, temporarily abandoning the rigging, take a single point of damage as normal. In addition, the ship may not change its sail setting next turn. So there's another point of damage off of the Prince's foremast. Still got 2 boxes unchecked, so it's a fair way from having to drop its speed from losing a mast. But that gives you not a particularly spectacular result, but that gives you a feel of how the gunnery works. So I'm gonna play out the rest of the gunnery phase off camera and show you the final result of the turn at the end. Actually, I will show you one more exchange, or not exchange of gunfire, but one more salvo of gunfire, because it might have slightly more impact than that last salvo did. So here we have a French frigate stern raking a British 74 gun vessel. So the frigate's lightly armed, and both these ships have suffered a great deal of damage. And in the frigate's case, that damage has been on the lower targets. So it's currently only able, well, for the rest of the game, it will only be able to fire half of its normal broadside. Its normal broadside is quite light anyway, 2 light dice and 2 heavy dice. It hasn't got any carronade, so no carronade dice. And the British ship has lost nearly all of its points of damage for all 3 masts. All 3 are still standing, but they're all 3 very close to being destroyed. And in the case of a stern rake, all the hits will be determined to be on the rearmost mast, whatever it is at the time. So at the moment, it's the mizzen mast. So the broadside of the frigate is down to 1 heavy dice, 1 light dice, but it is within 10 centimetres, which means there is +1. We're going to fire low in this. We're going to fire high in this case because it's a French ship, which has an advantage firing high, but it will get +1 to the dice rolls for being in close range as well. Okay, now that means that it's hitting on 3s rather than 4s, and the critical hits, because it's not a roll of 6, it's a score of 6, so any 5s will go up to 6, meaning that 5s and 6s are critical hits. And we've scored 2 misses, complete misses. Now, had that been a British ship firing, it could have re-rolled those, because one of the British abilities is to be able to re-roll 1s, but 1s, unfortunately, are total failures, so that wasn't quite as spectacular as I was hoping. Apologies for that, you can't control the dice. Anyway, I will now go on and play the rest of the gunnery phase off camera. Okay, I'll try again, one more time. So now we're on to the British firing, and the Victory is stern raking this French 74 gun there, and I've just rolled, and the result is a lot more effective, so I thought I would show you this. So the roll is that. So currently it's only forced to hit because it's about 19 centimetre distance. So those 2 light guns both got critical hits. There's a 6 there for the heavy guns. There is a 5 and a 4, which are both hits as well. And also, one of the light guns rolled a 1. So, as I said earlier, the British are entitled to re-roll that, and they still don't hit with it. So, we have 2 hits there that aren't critical. So, the French can try and save those. And a stern rake means that it's -2 to the enemy saves. Now, a low location would normally save on a 4, so that means the French can only save those 2 hits on a 6. And they do save 1, but not the other. So that's straightforward, just 1 further box off of the low location target. But these other 3 are all critical hits, so they might cause further damage. And again, because it's a stern rake, the French can only save them on a 6, and they don't save any. So we'll work our way through these. So on the critical hit table for the low target, we roll for that first of all, and we're rolling a d6 for this. Rolled a 2, so it says a great chunk of the ship is torn away, washing men overboard. Take a single point of damage as normal and cross off D3 crew points. So we'll halve this. So we're going to lose 2 crew and 1 hull. Still plenty of crew left, but the as you can see, only 1 more damage box to tick off, and then we go down to this next tier, and at that point the French ship will lose its carronades, and it does have 1 carronade there, so that will be crossed off. Okay, now in the case of the 2 light gun hits, we're rolling D3, so we're going to halve both of these. So I rolled a 4 and a 5, so that is a location, that is a result of 2 and 3. So 2 we just had, so another point of damage, which means it has now lost its carronades, and another D3, so that's 3 crew off this time. So that now means that it's lost, we've gone through a grey box there, so it's lost 1 command value. So its command value goes down from 4 to 3. You need to do command checks for things like attacking and certain manoeuvres. So this is having an impact on the ship. And what was the other one? The other one was a 3. So 3 is the tar saturated wood catches light and flames begin to spread across the ship. Take a single point of damage as normal and place an ablaze counter next to the ship. Test on the blaze table in the next end phase. So that ship is now ablaze, as well as taking another low location box off. So that gives you a bit more example about, of the gunnery, slightly more dramatic than that last pathetic double 1. Okay, so I've just arrived at the end of that turn. During the remainder of the gunnery phase, not much else happened. Well, there weren't that many ships that had sort of other enemy vessels in their arcs of fire, but this 74 gun British ship here did manage to inflict 1 damage point on that French 74 gun, but that was at long range, and so there wasn't much damage done. In the end phase, the fire that had been on board that you saw inflicted on that ship there was actually put out, but there were two other fires raging. This one here, there was a powder explosion in this 120 gun French ship, and it's close to sinking now basically. And over in the distance there, that ship, again there was a powder explosion. No crew left aboard alive now, so it is drifting, and the wind isn't going to change or anything. I've just rolled for that and it's back to being steady. So if it drifts in the wind, it will slowly, D3 centimetres at a time, be driven onto the cliffs. I can recrew it if I can get a ship close to it, but that's going to take quite a long time, and I might just let it drift, and the game may be over before it reaches the cliffs. To be honest, I'm not quite sure how you score these games. I think because there are a lot of scenarios in the back of the book, it's all scenario driven, so I might just have to decide who's won. But the French didn't come out of that particularly well that turn, so on to the next turn anyway. End of another turn, and it really is a slogging match. I can't really make out who is winning yet. Both sides have taken massive amounts of damage, but it's hard to say who's coming out on top. It's like sort of two punch drunk fighters now, slogging it out. The main things that happened in that round, that ship there, the Prince, anchored in order to avoid colliding with the debris, but that debris is now being removed. But over there, one of the British ships, a 64 gun ship, was being handled so poorly because of reduction in its command factor and so on, and it collided with the ship in front of it, causing yet more damage to it, so it sank. There are two of the main French ships are now crewless, ablaze and drifting. That's one of them. The other one you've seen before over there. The British didn't really get off much. They just didn't have any targets in this turn. The French had a few, so just continued to chip away at the British. And really, I mean, the wind is more likely to change next turn now, because I've thrown again for decreasing and backing. So if I repeat either of those two labels again in the next turn, it will change. But I definitely want to go on with it, because I can't decide who's got the upper hand. But that's the French flagship there, and that only has its light guns left. But nearby is this 110 gun Spanish ship, which is largely intact. It's just out of the action at the moment, and it's very cumbersome to handle, so it's taken a while for it to turn, but it has managed to tack and turn back now, so it will be able to get back into the action in a turn or two. So it is still a threat to the British there, whereas the British, even though it does, I keep saying it doesn't look like it, looking at the models, there's so many of them dismasted and they're close to being crewless or holed under the waterline totally. So I think as the game goes on, there's going to be, more and more losses they're going to accumulate. So it should become more apparent within the next few turns. So not a great deal of engagement between the ships in that turn, because the ships are quite separated now and slowly manoeuvring to get back into gunnery range of one another. But forgot to mention on the last turn that British frigate there had been completely demasted, so he'd anchored in this turn, but then was pummeled again by this French frigate, and its guns were silenced, so it couldn't return fire. A little bit of gunfire here onto the Prince, didn't do a great deal. I think, in fact, I think every dice roll failed, so it didn't make any damage at all. The two ships that are on fire, I mean, that took up the majority of the time, was tracking the progress of the fires in these decrewed ships. They're losing their masts. The masts have taken fire. So they're actually blazing infernos now, but they haven't quite sunk. They're still drifting, and the flagship there is steadily turning, as is the Spanish ship here, but it's going to take quite a few turns before they actually get back into the action. But I'm going to keep going because it could go either way. So, the other disaster for the British was that I was just manoeuvring the Victory really badly, and it just sailed too close to the edge of the table, and I decided to be harsh on myself and follow the rules strictly, which meant that it's removed from the game. So yeah, it is still, pretty balanced. The Royal Sovereign is the next largest British ship, and that's, where is it? That one there. That's relatively undamaged. So it's got the advantage of manoeuvrability over the Spanish ship, but they're at opposite ends of the table at the moment. But I suspect it's going to be a clash between those two that may well decide the game. So I'm going to carry on. And the wind, did I say the wind has gone back to steady, so no likelihood of a wind change in the near future. Well, another relatively quiet turn, simply because the ships are either out of range of one another or out of arc of fire. But I mean, this was the only firing going on here, really. These two ships exchanging fire, and the one British ship over there getting a raking shot onto that French, I think that's 74 gun ship there. There were some fires caused as a result of that, but they were all extinguished in the end phase. So not vast amounts of damage, other than the Prince is completely unmasted now, so it will drop anchor. She will drop anchor in the next turn and just remain as a sort of stationary floating gun platform. And the other two French ships that are ablaze and uncrewed will continue to drift, possibly being burnt to destruction before they drift into the shoreline. And the Spanish ship there is heading in the right direction now. So a couple of turns. This next turn, the weather's going to remain steady again. It will be the 12th turn, so I think I'm going to set myself, which a lot of the scenarios have the same limit of 20 turns for the game. And then if there are still any surviving vessels on one side or the other, on both sides, then I might sort of count up points or something like that, assess who won that way. So quite a long way, quite a lot to play out yet, but the turns are going a lot faster now because there's just the manoeuvring to do really, and not very much in the way of gunfire at this moment. Okay, on to the next turn then. Main things that happened in that turn were not good news for the British, basically. This ship here, 74 gun, has now lost all its crew. So it's just going to drift. This other British 74 gun over here has now lost all its masts, so it's still crewed, it can still fire, but in the same way as the Prince had to anchor, it will have to anchor in the next turn and just be a floating gun platform. So I've given up trying to sort of calculate the effects of the fires in those two French ships. I'm just going to basically let them drift now without worrying that the fire is going to, potentially, I don't know if you can actually. Oh, I suppose you could sink a ship through fire if you took enough damage points to the hull and so on, but they're just going to drift as burning wrecks now for the rest of the game, so I'm not going to bother about doing any more calculations on them because it's a bit of a headache. And I don't know whether this game will go to 20 turns, because I'll call it a day when the British no longer have any ships capable of both fighting and sailing, and that's not many of them. Definitely the Royal Sovereign there is still in the fight. Oh, and that 74 gun there, that's British vessel, that's still operational, but not much else. So it's looking more like I don't know. It's looking more like a Franco-Spanish win, but there's still still a possibility the British could swing it. Right. Well, there is still disasters going on, but really this sort of massive scrum in the middle is a sort of stalemate with all the ships facing various calamities, either losing all their masts or all their crew, or being very close to it. The Prince down here, where is it? There, the Prince down there. There's only one crew box left at the moment, so it's got no masts, only one crew box left, and this ship here is probably going to rake it again in the next turn. So that's finished. There's a ship here which is crippled, so it's lost all its lower hull points, so it's no guns left. Small number of crew, it's on fire. All kinds of things happening. So really, whilst I'm playing all this out, the game is now going to revolve around the outcome of the conflict between those two British ships over one side of this melee and the Spanish ship, which is way over the other side. And I can't really say who's going to come out on top with that, so I've got to keep playing. If I put myself in the position of either player, I'm playing this solo, but if I was playing one side or the other, both sides, I wouldn't be prepared to actually concede defeat yet. So although it's absolutely bruising fight on both sides, its victory could still go one way or the other. So we're going to carry on again. Weather still remaining steady. Well, I think the French are going to come out on top, but I'll keep going because the British are still putting up a fight. But as well as the Spanish 110 gun ship, which is slowly trying to make its way into the fight again. Unfortunately, it turns very slowly, and it's trying to turn to starboard to avoid this burning, drifting wreckage here, and it will be able to get round it because it's got enough manoeuvrability, but it's not turning fast enough, and it's still got a way to go. But over here you can see the French still have two 74 gun ships in the fray, which are badly damaged but still capable of inflicting harm on the British. This one here, has just bow raked the Royal Sovereign, which is the last of the British kind of first-rate ships, and severely damaged the foremast. So one more shot like that, and the Royal Sovereign's going to lose its foremast anyway. And the other one down here, this one is now completely finished off the Prince. It's decrewed, so at anchor, but with no crew on it, so it's not going to be able to do anything other than just sit there now. So there's the potential for this one as well now to get some hits on those two other British ships, but they've got to negotiate their way through or around all this, the drifting remains and so on of all these vessels. This French frigate here is now decrewed, so that's just an obstacle that has to be negotiated, as are a lot of these other ships. So I'm going to carry on, see how things progress. Okay, another dramatic turn. Not much to do now the ships are being silenced and that there's less arithmetic, and the turns are turning over a lot more rapidly. So down here you can see this drifting vessel, which is potential obstacle to these other two vessels trying to get past it to get back into the action. Both ships are sort of successfully negotiating their way past it because it's drifting that way now, but this ship will have to move first anyway, so it will get past it. But over here, wow, what a heroic bit of sailing this was, that the French 74 gun here managed to get a bow rake on the British 74 gun, and it was the British ship was already damaged, but the result of the rake meant that it lost all of its masts. Every single mast had some damage on it, and the roll for the bow rake was just so high that it took out each mast in succession. So that ship is now effectively drifting. So there's really only one mobile ship left on the British side, so it could soon be over, this game. There it is, the Royal Sovereign. But unfortunately for the French ship there, it presented its stern to that ship there, which is anchored and stationary, but still is armed and dangerous, and it took a lot of damage. It's down to, I think it's down to one crew left before it's decrewed, and it's only got its light guns left, but it's done its task, performed its task, and the weather as well for the next turn has the potential to increase. The wind has potential to increase and back, so the possibility of the wind changing right at the end of the battle. So as I said before, I'm going to carry on just to see how the Royal Sovereign fares, but once the Royal Sovereign is effectively out of the combat, that's going to definitely be the victory to the French and Spanish. Right, now the Royal Sovereign chanced a very risky manoeuvre and has just got away with it. That she's managed to squeeze through this gap here between two drifting vessels, and that has sort of foiled in a way the especially this ship here is now on the wrong side, can't get a clear shot at her, and the Spanish ship here has reacted by backing sails, so she'll come to a halt next turn, and then might be able to sort of heave to, point in a different direction, to begin to point this way again to try and cut the Royal Sovereign off. And the only other thing that really happened in that turn was that over here the 74 gun British ship, which is now at anchor because it's demasted, did manage to stern rake once again, punish this French ship. Did some damage, not a considerable amount, but you know, it's quite badly damaged already, that ship, so that was painful. And the potential for the wind has changed again, but in the opposite direction to what it was before, so there still isn't a duplication of potential characteristics in order to make the wind change. So the wind remains moderate breeze and steady at the moment. Right, so we'll start by showing you the Royal Sovereign, which is the last surviving mobile and capable of fighting ship in the British fleet, and there are 4 French ships now, still capable of moving and firing, but only one of them really capable of doing much damage to this ship, the Royal Sovereign. So although the game is sort of favouring the French now, there is still a chance that the British are going to win. And there were 5 ships on the French-Spanish side, but look at that. The Royal Sovereign managed to get a stern rake on the one of the French 74 guns that was fairly significantly damaged already, it has to be said, but through so many critical hits that it just held it sufficiently below the waterline for it to sink. So that's the kind of reason I'm carrying on, persisting, is that the Royal Sovereign is really doing well. There are other things happening as well. Just the British ship there cut its anchor simply so that it could try and drift faster than this French frigate that was on fire and could drift into it. It didn't succeed, so now they're, you know, sort of drifting together like that. I'm going to say that they're just going to drift, and I'm not going to attempt to. There's no way the British ship can negotiate its way out of that anyway, because it doesn't have any mass. So I'm just going to treat them as a sort of floating obstacle for now and say that that British ship is gone completely. And I forgot to say on the previous turn, but over there, that French ship that was one of the first to be crippled and on fire has finally drifted into the rocks. It did that on the last turn. The Spanish ship, where is it? There, has now come to a halt because it's got to try and find some way of getting the Royal Sovereign back into its arc of fire. So it's come to a halt, and next turn it will remain on that spot, but will turn on the spot. It's allowed to do that in these rules. Give up its whole movement just to turn on the spot, so that it doesn't have to try and worry about working its way around that drifting obstacle and through all that wreckage. But it's, I don't know, the Royal Sovereign's got the kind of upper hand at the moment, even though that ship has got the weather gauge. Yeah, and I think I said, did I say? Oh no, I didn't say that the wind has now dropped in strength, which means I'm kind of mixing two sets of rules up here, because I like the wind rules from Signal for Close Action by Langton better than the rules in Trafalgar. But in the Warhammer Historical rules, when the wind drops, everything loses 2 centimetres of movement just for this turn. So I'm going to have to remember that. Okay, on to the next turn. Right, well, the only gunfire that happened in that turn, there's absolutely nothing that's got a bearing on anything other than this tiny French frigate here managed to, he's only got half his broadside left, but he got one heavy gun shot off at the stern of the Royal Sovereign and failed to do any damage. He missed, basically. So next turn is going to be interesting, because that's where the Royal Sovereign and the Spanish 110 ship here are likely to exchange gunfire next turn, and it could determine the winner of the game, really. If the Franco-Spanish side can knock the Royal Sovereign out, then the game will be over effectively. Okay, so I'm halfway through this turn now, and I've done all the movements, and I'm now onto the gunnery phase, and the only exchange of fire is between the two, what are now the two main protagonists in this game. That is the Royal Sovereign versus this 112 gun Spanish ship. So I thought I would show the dice rolling on camera, just to repeat, show you the mechanism of the gunfire again. But it's going to be interesting because it's very evenly balanced. So I can't really predict who is going to come out on top, but this will really determine these final few turns with the firing between these two ships is really going to determine which side wins the game, I think. So it's interesting, I feel. Okay, so the Franco-Spanish side have the weather gauge in this turn. That means they get to fire first. The Spanish ship normally would fire. It's very heavily equipped with heavy guns. So, I'm putting some dice here, but you can't actually see them. So, it has 2 light guns. Normally a ship of that size would have 4, but it has 6. Not guns. It's rolling 2 dice representing the light cannon. Normally normally a ship of that size would roll 4. 6 heavy dice, whereas normally a ship of that size, i.e. the Royal Sovereign, would have 4 as well. So it's weighted up towards the heavy gun armament, and it also has 2 carronades. So that differs from the Royal Sovereign in that the Royal Sovereign looks like that. So initially the Spanish ship has a certain advantage in weight of cannon fire, but during the game it's already taken quite a lot of damage. This is the Spanish ship, and it no longer has 2 carronades, whereas the Royal Sovereign does. So this is going to balance out a little bit, which is what I'm saying about how it's difficult to predict how this is going to go. The range, I'm measuring the range between the tops of the main mast, is less than 10 centimetres, so this is short range. I'll show you the dice roll. So normally you need 4s to hit, but because it's short close range, they only need 3s to hit, and normally you need 6 to get a critical hit, but it's the score, not the roll of the dice. So because it's +1, 5s and 6s will be critical hits. Okay, so 3s to hit basically, so I can take out a lot of, they haven't done particularly well, but 4 of the heavy cannon dice have hit, and 1 is a 5, meaning that is a critical hit. So because it's less than half range with the heavy gun dice, that means there is a negative effect on the saving roll of the British ship. So normally firing at a low location, which they both are by the way, it's a save on a 4, but now it's going to be saving on a 5. So I'll do the 3 non-critical hits first of all, because this is pretty simple. So 1 has been saved. That means that there are 2 boxes ticked off the low location on the Royal Sovereign, and it still hasn't taken enough damage to lose those carronades. If it does, it won't be able to use the carronades in the return of fire, but we have this critical hit here, so let's hope that they don't save that, well, from the Spanish point of view. So it's 5s to save again, and they don't save it. That means that it's a critical hit, so we roll on the critical hit table, roll a d6, and we've rolled a 3. So the tar saturated wood catches light and flames begin to spread across the ship. Take a single point of damage as normal and place in a blaze counter next to the ship. Test on the blaze table in the next phase. So what's happened is that the single point of damage has just tipped the damage on the Royal Sovereign over, so it no longer has carronades available when it returns fire, and that is solely one of the advantages of having the weather gauge from the Spanish point of view. Okay, so now when the Royal Sovereign fires back, it's rolling 4 heavy and 4 light dice, again needing 3s to hit because it's close range. And the one there can be re-rolled because of a British ability. So I'll take the 2s out, but everything else is hit, and the 5s and 6s are critical hits, of which there are quite a few. We'll re-roll the 1, and it's another critical hit. Okay, so we've only got one. This is looking bad for the Spanish. We've only got one non-critical hit, and it's saved on 5 because it's heavy dice at close range, and it's not saved. That means that one box is ticked off of the Spanish hull. Right, now the others are all critical hits. The orange dice saving on 5s, and the white dice saving on 4s. So there's only one save there. So there are 2 light dice critical hits and 2 heavy dice critical hits. So let's do the heavy dice first of all. We roll both of them on the critical hit table. 1 is panic spreads throughout the ship as the shots strike home. Take a single point of damage as normal, so I'll tick that off first of all. However, the vessel may not fire this turn or next. So it has already fired this turn. So that's, good for it. But we place a may not fire counter on it for the next turn. So that may be a game changer. Excuse me a moment while I try and find the appropriate counter. There we go. So we've got a cannon token with a cross through it. Okay, now, so that's number 1, which we've dealt with. 5 is cannonballs tear into the ship, sending splinters flying through the decks. Take D3 damage points instead of the usual 1 and lose a crew point. So we can cross that off straight away. D3 damage points, let's divide that by 2. So it's 2 damage points, which I'm ticking off. Take a below the waterline saving throw. If you fail, take 1 below the waterline hit. So saving throw for below the waterline is 4+. And we only rolled a 1. So they've lost 1 below the waterline box. So there's only another, there are 5 of them altogether. There's only another 4 to go before you sink the ship. Okay, so that's the heavy dice. Then we've got 2 light dice critical hits. These are, you roll D3 on the critical hit table for these rather than D6, so we divide both of these by 2. So we've got a 2 and a 1. So again, 1 is the same as we've already had, so you don't duplicate that token, but we do still take a single point off the target again. So that's not, you can't duplicate the effects. If all the crew are dead, you can't kill more crew, for instance, or something like that. Okay, and the 2 is a great chunk of the ship is torn away, washing men overboard. Take a single point of damage as normal, so I tick that off. And cross off D3 crew points. So that's divided by 1, so it's only 1 crew point, so that's not so bad. So 1 more hull damage and they will lose the heavy cannons, so they're quite vulnerable now, but they've got a little way to go before they lose enough crew to lose a command value point. So that is the exchange of fire, I would say it probably went the Royal Sovereign's way. The Spanish ship was lucky to knock off the carronades of the Royal Sovereign. Now, that is the end of the turn as well, effectively. So when I go on to I've just got to roll to see if the weather changes. Don't think there's anything else I need to, any other kind of house. Right, so we rolled a 6, which means it's steady still for the next turn. So I'll make all the next moves and then probably show you what gunfire in the next turn is like as well. But the Spanish ship will get to move first. No, sorry, beg your pardon. The Royal Sovereign is to leeward, so that has to move first, and then the Royal Sovereign. And then the Spanish ship. The Royal Sovereign is easier to handle than the Spanish ship. So it may well be that the British ship can get behind the stern of the Spanish ship somehow more easily than the Spanish ship will be able to do. But I'll play that off camera and then show you what's going on soon. Okay, so that's the situation and the crucial part of the battlefield, as it were. I don't know what's the equivalent, the area of battle on the sea surface. I don't know. I've moved everything else. There's nothing else going on anywhere else. So this is where all the main action is. So the fire that started on the Royal Sovereign not only didn't go out, but also has spread to the foremast. That took another box of damage ticked off on the foremast, which meant that it lost its foremast because it had already taken some considerable damage to that mast. So in losing the mast, it therefore lost its top speed. So its top speed now does not qualify it to be able to make 2 shallow turns in one move. So it's slightly, as you would expect, it has slightly altered its manoeuvrability. So it has made 1 shallow turn, but it couldn't make another. Hence the fact that it doesn't look as though it's pointing in very different direction. The Spanish ship, on the other hand, has to roll. Was able to make 2 shallow turns in terms of its speed, because its original attitude to the wind gave it a little bit extra movement, but it does have to roll a command roll to make that second move because it is a less wieldy ship. It succeeded, so it is actually in a perfect position to fire a raking shot into the Royal Sovereign. Unfortunately though, if you remember, it can't fire this turn, so that is its opportunity gone really. And limping into the battle is the French flagship, which does have, I know the angles look quite wide, but in this game that is a valid shot, so you use that angle there, and equally the Royal Sovereign that way. So both ships can fire at one another. The French ship will fire first, but it only has 4 light dice to fire. The rest of it's what do you call them? The rest of its salvo is disabled. Broadside, that's the word I'm looking for. Okay, so we're going to roll 4 dice. It's straightforward force to hit. There's no advantage in terms of range or anything like that. And that's not bad. We've got 3 hits, 2 of which are critical. Okay, so the saving roll for the Royal Sovereign, I should have said actually, yeah, it's cheating in a way. It's not, well, it's cheating, it's not. All the game, the French ships have been firing high, so I should have said it was firing at the mast, so I was just assuming it and didn't speak out verbally to the camera, but it was firing at the mast. So the saving throw for the high locations is a 5, and that is a French benefit, that often there's a -1 penalty to firing at the rigging, but the French don't have that penalty. That's one of their national characteristics. So it's 5 to save, and they save it. Okay, now the two critical hits, it's 5 to save, and they save one of them, but the other one is a critical. You roll on the critical hit table, and it's a D3 because it's a light cannon, so it's only 2, and that is the mast is struck. If the hit is unsaved, take 2 points of damage. Well, the hit is unsaved because I've already tried to save it. Take 2 points of damage instead of 1. Okay, so it's the Royal Sovereign is left with 2 masts, the main mast and the mizzen mast. So 1, 2 and 3 is the main mast. No, so the mizzen mast takes 2 points of damage. Okay, so that was the fire from the French ship, but now the Royal Sovereign gets to fire back, and it's still got 4 light dice and 4 heavy, so this could be painful. Again, straightforward force to hit, it's not below 10 centimetres. And again, those 2 ones, he can re-roll in a moment. So we'll take the 3s and the 2s out. So we've got a straightforward hit, a critical hit, another straightforward hit, and we can re-roll these 2 1s, and we get 1 more hit. Right. Okay, so the French ship, these are rolling low, by the way, because that's what the British have been doing all through the game. And the French ship is very close, not far off being crippled. It's only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 low location boxes left. Right, so these are all straightforward saves, saving on 4+. Doesn't save any, so it's lost 3 of those 6. And then again, the critical hit is saving on 4+. No, it fails, so we roll on the critical hit table and get 4. That is the rudder is hit. Take a single point of damage. In addition, the vessel may not take any turns or manoeuvres until it is repaired. Roll a d6 at the start of each subsequent sailing phase. On a score of 6, the rudder is repaired. Now, I don't actually have an appropriate token for rudder damage. So what I've been doing is putting, I don't have any left, there's so many rudders damaged in this game. Here we go. I've been putting one of these black sails behind the vessel just to indicate that its rudder is damaged at the moment. So it survives, but it's going to have to sail straight forward in that direction. and may well end up blocking as soon as the Spanish ship can fire again. It's probably going to have its field of fire blocked by the intervening French ship. But anyway, we'll see how we get on. Okay, so that is the end of that phase. So just have to do a little bit of administration. So the may not fire marker can come off. And we roll on a blaze table for the ongoing fire on the Royal Sovereign. So 5, I don't think is good news. Remains of fire. The damaged location takes 1 more point of damage. So that means they take another damage off the low location. Ship remains ablaze. In addition, lose 3 D3 crew. Sorry, lose D3 crew points. So that is a 6. So they lose 3 more crew, and that means that they've just gone over tipping point where they've gone down 1 command value. And the front mast as well. You have to roll on a burning sails table because the foremast is ablaze as well. That's a 4. Remains of fire. The location takes 1 more point of damage. Oh well, in fact, the foremast has collapsed. So there wasn't any need to do that because the foremast has ceased to exist. Okay, right. So what I'll do now then is do the moves again off camera and then come back and show you the situation, and if there's any gunfire, show you that as well. Well, that fire and the consequent collapse of the foremast might have been the turning point really in this contest, because it's really foiling the Royal Sovereign's ability to be able to turn, and it's now in a situation where it hasn't got an enemy ship in its arc of fire, whereas both these ships can fire on the Royal Sovereign. This is actually a stern rake from the Spanish ship, but it's at extreme range. It's just within 30 centimetres. So that does mean it's 6 heavy dice can fire, not the lighter dice. They've only got a range of 20, but it's a -1 for the distance, the long range. So it'll be hitting on 5s rather than 6s. And this shot here isn't, I'm not including it as a stern rake. So that's got 4 light dice that can fire, hitting on straightforward 4. And the Royal Sovereign in this turn won't be able to return fire. Okay, so let's do the 6 heavy dice from the Spanish ship first. So these are hitting on 5s. Wow, yeah, good roll. Two 5s and 2 6s, so 2 critical hits. And because it's a stern rake, it's -2 to the saves. Now, firing at a low location, which the Spanish ship is, normally it'd be saving on 4. That means it's saving on 6s. So we do the 2 straightforward ones first of all. Doesn't save either, so it loses another 2 boxes from its hull. And then these are the 2 criticals, so saving on 6s. No, doesn't save either. So we roll both of those on the... Oh, and yeah, and you add 1, because it's a stern rake, you add 1 to the rolls on the critical table. So that is a 2 and a 4. Okay, 2, read before, is a great chunk of the ship is torn away, washing men overboard, take a single point of damage as normal, and cross off D3 crew points. So that's one more crew point off. And the 4 is that the rudder is hit. Single point of damage is normal. And we have to find another. I know what I'll do, I'll take one off one of these other stationary ships. There, so that is, so the Royal Sovereign, until it can repair the rudder, which by the way the French flagship didn't, so it just back sailed so that it wasn't sailing quite so far. But until the Royal Sovereign can fix its rudder, it's got to sail in that direction. Okay, so it can't return far. Oh yeah, we can still roll the 4 French light guns, can't we? So these are hitting on straightforward 4s. 2 hits, 1 critical. And it's saving on straightforward. Oh no, hang on, I'm firing at the rigging again, I must keep remembering that. So that will be saving on 5s. So we do the normal one first of all. Yeah, saved it, and then the critical one. Saved it, right. So a bit of luck for it. Okay, so next thing to do then in the end phase is just to roll on the ablaze table. So 5 is remains of fire. The damage location takes 1 more point of damage, so that's another 1 on the hull. With no save allowed, the ship remains ablaze. In addition, lose D3 crew points to the blaze. Now, it's only got 3 crew left. So it's now only got 2 crew left. But as soon as it's decrewed, then that's the end of the game effectively, because there won't be any British ships with any manoeuvrability left. So it's getting close to the end, so I'll carry on, make the manoeuvres again, and then we'll play the gunfire for the next round. Well, in the movement phase, the ships ended up like this, with the Royal Sovereign fixed the rudder, so was able to turn slightly, but wasn't moving particularly speedily, so didn't turn very well. And the other 2 ships, the Spanish ship is now out of range, but did tack successfully into the wind and around, which was a bit of, a coup really for a Spanish ship to handle that well. The French ship didn't fix its rudder, so just moved forward with back sails to move as short a distance as possible. But even then, it hasn't really got. Oh well, it has got the Royal Sovereign in its arc of fire, but it's only got light guns left, and it's beyond the range of the light guns. But what actually happened was that the fire took hold in the ship and burnt sufficient of the hull for the broadside to go down just the light guns, which was bad enough. But then sufficient crew were killed to decrew the ship, so there are now no crew left alive on the ship. So in other words, it's crewless and adrift and no longer under control. So the British no longer have any ships under control. Thus the French and Spanish win the game. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. It's taken me, I've taken my time, and it's taken over the course of 2 days. And I must admit, at times I was, especially at the beginning, when there were lots of ships to control and lots of things to bear in mind, factors to keep in your head, or try and put little tokens down to remind me of what was going on each ship. you did have to concentrate, and it did get a little bit arduous for a while, but as the turns got shorter, I thought that played really well. And the rules are, fairly simplistic, but detailed enough to give it credibility. And I was playing the very basic rules, so I didn't play any of the advanced rules, which include rules for things like boarding and so on. Didn't play any of that, and enjoyed it for that reason, really. That it was as fast as I could make it, simple as I could make it. And the interesting thing for me was the difference in tactics. That the French use their ability, or their enhanced ability to be able to fire at the masts without penalty, the rigging and the masts. And in the end, I think that was what won them the game, because there were lots of British ships still on the table here, but they all lost their masts, and so either started to drift, or because they'd also lost their crew, or they anchored and then couldn't take any further part, to prevent them drifting, and couldn't take any further part in the game. So that was another one. In the advanced rules, you can make repairs, but I wasn't playing that. That would have made it far more convoluted again. So I think if you only play a couple of ships per side, the game would be playable in an evening, and would give you enough time to think about the kind of granularity of it on board each ship. But playing on my own solo, and also having to work out the considerations for every single ship on the table, did make it a little bit, as I say, a little bit strenuous and arduous for a while. But yeah, I really enjoyed that, and hope you did as well. There were all things going on off camera, like over there, frigate having to tack into the wind in order to avoid the shoreline, which it managed to do, but there were all potential hazards going on like that. So a good way to celebrate Trafalgar Day, even though it's now the day after. Right, I'll stop waffling. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. See you on the next video. Bye for now.